Good evening from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia. Here's my selective summary of the latest United States news headlines, and these are taken from several major U.S. daily newspapers: the Washington Post, the New York Times, Miami Herald, Chicago Tribune, Dallas News, Los Angeles Times, and the Seattle Times, as well as from the cable news networks website. No copyright infringement obviously intended. According to the Washington Post, U.S. economy draws comparisons with the 1990s, but with caveats. Of course, one strong caveat is that the U.S. federal budget deficit is still, for all practical purposes, out of control. Although in the fiscal year 2017 to 18, it ended up dipping slightly below $1 trillion. The fact is that during Donald Trump's presidency so far, over $2 trillion have been added to the US national debt, which is, as we know, higher than the US gross domestic product. Also, there is a greater inequality between the rich and the poor and less readiness for a downturn. US President Trump has said to Congress, "See you in court." After a lifetime of legal action, the president is counting on my judges to defend him against an array of threats, from subpoenas to impeachment. But that could constitute grounds for inquiring on whether to impeach him for obstruction of justice. And quite many US politicians and judges were already alive and working 2 decades ago when then President Bill Clinton was actually impeached by the House of Representatives on 2 counts, meaning perjury, that is lying under oath about his extramarital affair with former White House intern Monica Lewinsky, and then obstruction of justice. The US Senate, however, acquitted him on both charges. I can land the plane how Rod Rosenstein tried to mollify Trump, protect Mueller, and save his job. With his job in the balance, the Deputy Attorney General assured President Trump in September 2018 that he was on his team and said he would ensure Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III treated Trump fairly. Former US President Joseph Biden on Thursday announced that he would seek the US presidency, joining a very crowded field of Democratic presidential hopefuls. I think there are already nearly 20 announced presidential candidates. So one problem, of course, is the possibility that it will be a long, drawn-out struggle while President Trump may not have any major challengers, which of course means that he will save a lot of money in the Republican presidential primaries, while whoever wins the Democratic presidential candidacy will have to expend a lot of money and will then have to spend a lot of time raising additional funds for the general election campaign. Perspective: Joe Biden, the master of not quite getting it. It would have been so much better if, rather than pointing out that times were different, the candidate would apologize for not using the Anita Hill hearing back in 1991. She accused then Associate Justice nominee Clarence Thomas, interestingly enough, an African-American Republican and a conservative Republican at that, while Professor Hill, if she has any political affiliation or preference, probably is a Democrat, like most African-Americans who have a political preference are. She accused him of having sexually harassed her on several occasions by talking about, for example, genitals and other intimate details in human anatomy in the early 1980s, when for a couple of years they had worked together in the US Department of Education. And then Judge Thomas vehemently denied the charges and claimed that it was an electronic lynching for uppity blacks. In other words, African Americans who want to move up on the socioeconomic scale. Former Vice President Biden has himself been accused of having hugged or kissed various women without their consent in ways that have made them feel uncomfortable. While he has not been accused of raping anyone, and his level of alleged sexual harassment has not risen even nearly to the level of, for example, the disgraced US filmmaker Harvey Weinstein, whose accusations, or the accusations against whom, started the so-called Me Too movement in or around October 2017, and already in November of that year, Senator Al Franken decided to announce his resignation, or either in November or December, he decided to announce his resignation from the US Senate effective in January 2018, and he admitted having kissed or hugged various women without their consent, and apologized for having made them feel uncomfortable. Yes, former Vice President Biden was a senator from 1973 to 2009, representing Delaware, a small state on the US eastern or Atlantic coast. He was in charge of the Anita Hill hearing, and even he says it wasn't fair. Then we'll go to USA Today. "30,000 police officers across the United States banned for police misconduct, finally." Texas mayor charged with rigging his election. Court ruling stunts Trump offshore drilling plan. A controversial self-described Democratic Socialist Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez deletes Twitter blunder. Over 1,000 people have been quarantined in the Los Angeles measles scare. Famous American televangelist Reverend Franklin Graham says that Buttigieg sins by being a homosexual. Well, it is true that being a homosexual is a sinner, but also, for example, lying or committing adultery are also sins. And unfortunately, the current and also mocking other people. Unfortunately, the current US President, Donald Trump, has been guilty of all of these sins, and we should pray that he would repent, as well as we should pray that Jesus could come into the heart and life of Pete Buttigieg and set him free from all of these sins, including homosexuality. Giraffes one step closer to endangered species protection. Feds wicked couple filmed child sex abuse. Biden said he asked Obama not to endorse him. Border Patrol now releasing families in another city. 16 million in Chicago and Midwest brace for snow on the eve of May. Department of Justice Hoda Muthana lawsuit should be dismissed. And then we'll go to Los Angeles Times. The Democrats' brewing debate on foreign policy. Former Vice President Joseph Biden comes from the liberal internationalist tradition and backed US intervention in Bosnia. Sanders, meaning Bernard Sanders, self-described Democratic Socialist, who, however, caucuses with the Democrats in the US Senate, is a non-interventionist. Other candidates fall somewhere in between. Palisades High students chronicle an epidemic level of young people dying from gun violence. Chile vows to crack down on tourist burglars targeting California. Trump takes Biden's bait to defend his Charlottesville both sides response. Unite the Right rally took place in Charlottesville. Well, we'll probably have to get that. Charlottesville, Virginia. From August the 11th to 12th, 2017, it was a white supremacist rally that pitted members of the far right and self-identified members of the alternate right or alternative right, neo-Confederates, neo-fascists, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, members of the Ku Klux Klan and various militias against then their opponents. 3 people died. 1 counter-protester was killed by a participant in vehicle ramming attack. 2 state troopers died in a helicopter crash. 38 or more people were injured. 11 people were arrested. Controversially, President Trump claimed that there were some very fine people on both sides. He did not denounce the marchers explicitly, instead condemning hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. How California's faltering high-speed rail project was captured by costly consultants. Clippers' bittersweet ending is just the beginning for a team that has a bright future. Then we'll go to the New York Times. Guantanamo Bay as nursing home. Terrorism suspects are aging, with no sign that the prison will close. It's located on the southern coast of Cuba, but belongs to the United States. The Pentagon has now begun planning for detainees to grow old and die there. But officials are grappling with questions about how much medical care the prisoners should receive and how much Congress will provide to pay for it. The neighborhood is mostly African American and the buyers are mostly white American. In cities across the United States, white homeowners are arriving in places they have long avoided. The change is jolting the economics of the land beneath everyone. Failures in preventing and investigating the attacks, bombings in Sri Lanka, so not directly elected to the United States. From Opinion, do you know who's watching you? The Raisin situation. When Harry Overly became the chief executive of Sun-Maid Raisin Company, he was taken aback by the level of animosity he encountered. He wanted to change the US raisin industry for the better and got more than he bargained for. Opinion, the editorial board. Donald Trump shows a new level of contempt for Congress. Many presidents have resisted congressional demands for testimony and documents, but not quite like Mr. Trump. Then Edward Wasserman, Julian Assange, the recently arrested Australian whistleblower and creator of the WikiLeaks website, and the woeful state of whistleblowers. As the media's indispensable helpmates, don't they deserve constitutional protection too? Then we'll go to Chicago Tribune. Bears at the NFL draft, no regrets. Okay, I'm sorry, this is from the previous day. Weather Service declares winter storm warning as rare late snowstorm aims for Chicago area. Troubled family history of slain Crystal Lake boy A.G. Freund reveals missed warning signs, failed chances to intervene. Watchdog agency releases video of Chicago police officers firing at man accused of shooting at police. The hunt for Chicago tech jobs. Workers in cyber security, software developing, and information technology tell how they got started. You don't mess with Mother Nature or Nicole Case. The Nicole Case at Vic Review. Column on Chicago's lakefront, a curving pedestrian bridge over Lakeshore Drive also bends towards justice. Then we'll go to the Dallas News. With election day near, some Dallas mayoral candidates pull away money race. Dallas activist Dominic Alexander in jail again after arrest in Denton County. Cowboys selection of UCF's Tristan Hill reaffirms which positions Dallas truly values on defense. Murder suspect arrested in Louisiana months after police say he killed Dallas man and set his house ablaze. Texas will rescind its non-citizen voter advisory and pay $450,000 in fees to settle case. Jennifer Staubach Gates has money edge over Laura Miller in Dallas Council race's latest campaign filings. Then to Seattle Times. Seahawks trade up in NFL draft for Ole Miss WR DK Metcalf as Doug Baldwin considers retirement. Republicans around here are now complete lambs to Trump except for one by Danny Westmeat. Election updates: Monroe Kirkland Hospital measures fail. Lake Washington levy measure passes. Lawsuit seeks to prevent Washington, meaning Washington State, from releasing names of participants in state's bump stock buyback program. Yakima mayor drives sports utility vehicle into Rite Aid building. Miami Herald. The State Ethics Commission is fining Andrew Gillum $5,000. Is that a lot? Florida House passes, meaning House of Representatives of that state, passes bill that could stop cities from requiring affordable housing. Absolute hazard, fatal boat crash renews calls to put lights on jetty off Miami Beach. I have no parts for these pumps. The anatomy of a sewage spill in Miami-Dade County. Josh Rosen traded to Miami Dolphins. Grand plan to rebuild with 2020 QB takes detour. Well, that was from the previous day. Sorry. Then to CNN. China's recycling ban has sent the United States plastic to Malaysia. By the way, the Philippines' southern neighbor. Now they don't want it. Amount of plastic in ocean is worse than we thought, study says. 45 stunning lines from Trump's Hannity interview for Fox News. Source: Boeing whistleblowers called FAA, probably about the Boeing 737-800 airplane. Two airplanes have recently crashed, one in Indonesia, the other one in Ethiopia, and shortly after takeoff. Trump claiming that he's a young, vibrant man, even though he's turning 73 this year. Mind you, his possible Democratic opponent, former Vice President Joseph Biden, is turning 77 this year. Let's see. Anderson Cooper schools Lara Trump. Anderson Cooper is a well-known journalist of the CNN. Parag Khanna, the United States may have stake in China's future. Paul Shrachich, can Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister, Mr. Shinzo Abe, keep a critical alliance afloat? Mark Weinberg, the latest way Trump is thumbing his nose at the press.